Hi, this is Travis with another workout video for you guys. Sorry for the long break. I know I did a lot of content in the beginning of the pandemic with bands, primarily how to work out at home. Now I've been putting together a gym in my garage, and so I'll be talking more about gym type fitness. Whether you're in a commercial gym or a garage gym, either one should apply. And so I figured the most logical place to start would be when you first walk in the door or the garage door, and how to warm yourself up. A lot of different opinions out there on how to warm up. Some people don't do it at all, some people do it too long. Some people think stretching is all you need to do. So I'll be talking about some of the myths around warming up. So you'll hopefully minimize your risk of injury, get more of the results you're after, and then less of the injuries and stuff you don't want. So if you're interested in how to do that, stay tuned, and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so a place I often like to start is just on an exercise bike. Now, depending on where you're working, it doesn't necessarily have to be a bike. Kind of an old school bodybuilding strategy is to hop on a treadmill or an incline treadmill, and you can do that for 10 or 20, 30 minutes, whatever it is, kind of at a very low steady state, and they call that LISS oftentimes. You can do that if you want. I kind of just like a bike a little bit better. I like the fact that you get a little more emphasis on the quads, which is a muscle group that I often try to emphasize just because historically it's been kind of lagging for me. But I think the bike does a pretty nice job. Some people will say that a bike doesn't adequately work your upper body for warming up, and to an extent that's true. But if you get on a bike, you'll start to notice that your whole body is going to get warmer. I start to notice my arms, my back get hot. So you are also warming up your upper body. Probably not as specifically though. So if you're going to be doing an upper body session, you're going to probably want to do some other things in addition to the bike. But I just like to hop on the bike. It's pretty mindless for the most part. I'm not going, to the red or anything here, just kind of at a moderate intensity. I want to get a little bit of a sweat going in about 5-10 minutes, and then I'm done. I don't really want to work myself out too much and then take away from my workout. But I think it's a great way to warm up before a lower body exercise, and then even upper body, sometimes I'll hop on the bike. And then every bike's going to be a little different. If you notice my legs, I'm not trying to get you set up here for the Tour de France, but I like to have just a slight, I don't want to be totally locked out, slight bend in my knee. Now when this comes up, I'm still well below parallel. So, I'm just kind of at a comfortable position here where I can get good thigh activation. You don't want to be really riding like a beach cruiser where the seat's too low and your knees are up in your chest. You're not going to get as much out of it. So my sitting position is a little higher. Now, if I had low back considerations, some people aren't going to do as well on an upright bike for that reason. Sometimes a recumbent, which is more like a seat, or some other piece of equipment might be better for you. So it really just depends on what you have available. When I was in a commercial gym, they had a Versa climber, they had a Jacob's ladder. Sometimes I do that for 5 or 10 minutes. You kind of have to be used to those though, because in the beginning they're going to get you pretty tired, and you're going to be pretty worked probably before you get to your workout. So if you want to build up to that, that's great, but the bike is pretty straightforward, pretty tried and true. So the bike, 5-10 minutes. Just to let you know, I usually start out around a little less than 200 watts, and then maybe I might bump it up just a little bit. Again, not to work myself out, but I might just go, somewhere around, for me, 220, 240 is pretty good in the watts. I feel my heart rate getting up. It starts getting a little difficult to have a conversation, but not too much. That's kind of what they call that anaerobic threshold. Now, if I was doing the bike exclusively, I might want to go way beyond that, but for warming up, not too much. So for me, that's a pretty good band, but for you, again, you have to kind of size yourself up accordingly. But I look at the watts, and again, that's kind of like your power output, and that's the bike. Okay, so for those of you who saw my last video before I took a pause, you might remember this, the TRX. If I'm walking into a gym that has one of these, or fortunately I have one in my garage gym, this is a great tool to warm up as well. And what I'll do is I'll often come through and just do a few letters. And for those of you that remember some of the W's I did in the last video, this will look familiar. I'll just come in here, and I'm not real specific about this. I'm just making some W's in some different planes. Kind of just really warm up my shoulders and my external rotators, okay? I obviously wouldn't do this before a lower body workout. This is a great way to warm your upper body up. Just get that external rotation, really get those shoulders going. And so if you notice, I kind of mix and match. So I might come down in here kind of low, and then up higher, almost like a face pull. I'm just kind of going from one to the other. You may also notice I'm standing fairly tall. With the TRX, the farther your feet go in, the more resistance. But again, I'm just trying to warm up right now, so I'm not trying to go super heavy. I could pretty comfortably do 20 to 30 of these before I start getting tired. And I just go for a little bit of that muscle fatigue. You know, I'm not going for max reps here or going to failure per se. You know, I leave a little bit in the tank, and I might do that for a couple of rounds. Really does a nice job thoroughly warming up my shoulders. And that's the main one I'll use with the TRX. Now, if you're in a gym that doesn't have one of these, or you don't have one of these yet, or if you're just in like an apartment or a smaller setting where it's hard to anchor it to the roof, check out my last TRX video. I talked about how there's this new door hinge. This is a pretty cool little thing. You can just hook it up to any standard door. They also have the traditional more door anchor that kind of goes over the top. So you can use those as well for this exercise. You know, it's pretty straightforward. You really don't need any pendular motion, so the doors work pretty well. And that's the TRX with the warm-up. That's the main one that I do. Every now and then, or if I'm trying to emphasize biceps for whatever reason, sometimes I'll do the bicep curl as a warm-up as well. Less often though, but once in a while, I'll come in here and I'll just kind of warm up my biceps a little bit, okay? And I think that's a pretty good exercise as well. Notice I don't really pause when I'm warming up. I just kind of keep that continuous, constant tension. And I'm not really trying to, rest at the bottom, rest at the top. I just kind of, get more of that kind of quick, explosive pumping movement to kind of get a little extra blood flow into the bicep area. So every now and then I'll do that one, but the main one is going to be doing the letters. For those of you who are pretty familiar with some of my other content, you know I'm a big fan of bands. I still incorporate band training, even though I'm sort of back more in a gym type setting now. If you don't have access to a TRX, I think an exercise called a pull apart is a really nice way to also warm your shoulders up, okay? It's not quite the same as doing the W's, but it's a nice way to get into what we call the posterior or the rear delts, as they call them. Sometimes I actually like to take an angle that's a little high, kind of like a high to low. Most people do this straight plane, that's fine as well. I just kind of like the way it feels a little better when I'm coming down at an angle. And so I'll kind of do these. Sometimes I'll even pace as I do them. I'll just kind of walk the plank, as they say, as I'm going back and forth. Just kind of keep going. And I'll just kind of walk the plank. I try to keep mindful of my head position. I'm not trying to be in here. It's kind of that nice tall posture. And for some reason, pacing just seems to make this feel a little bit nicer. I don't know why. Probably just because I'm also warming up my lower body a little bit. And so sometimes I'll pace back and forth. Kind of makes the reps go a little bit faster. And I'll just kind of warm my shoulders up like that. Okay. There's another version called the door opener too, or I call the door opener. I don't know what other people call this. Palms up and more into your belly. So notice when I'm doing the pull apart, I'm pulling it more into that kind of like they call the nipple line, kind of in that vicinity. Maybe a little above, a little below is fine. With the door opener, I'm coming more into the belly area. And so I'll just come in here, again, just getting those rear delts. I may do the pacing. Usually I'm listening to music when I'm doing this. I'm just kind of walking around. I don't even count the reps most of the time. I probably do it for about a minute or so, 45 seconds to a minute. I'm just trying to get blood flowing, so I don't necessarily need to stop at 10 or 15 even. I might do 20 or 30. And that's a pretty nice way to get those shoulders warmed up as well. And so I'll do this one quite a bit. The nice thing about the band is it's pretty seamless. You can really transition from one exercise to the other pretty quickly, sort of like the TRX. Another one that I'll occasionally do is throw this around the top of my shoulders, kind of on that back of the shoulder area, not on the neck. And I'll just do some triceps. So same thing. I'll just kind of come in here and pace, just kind of working the triceps. Again, not really pausing. I'm just kind of going through here. A little flex at the bottom. Just kind of come through and just do some triceps. About the same count, 20 or 30. Just doing it for a minute or two. Not trying to be too specific about this. Just get those triceps nice and warmed up. Now, if you have access to a bar, you can certainly throw this around the top. You can come in here and you can do it that way as well. I find sometimes that makes it more of an exercise. And also it just slows it down a hair. So I don't do that version as often unless I'm doing it as an exercise, typically with a stronger band than this, or I'll double or triple this up sometimes. But biceps, same thing. I don't do biceps as often, warming up with this, kind of like the TRX, but sometimes I will, particularly if I'm recovering from some sort of an injury. I did have a bicep strain a little bit earlier this year. And so, if you're recovering from an injury, that certainly warrants sometimes spending some additional time warming up that body part. So if I came off a bicep strain, I probably would spend some extra time working my biceps. And so I'd put this thing underneath me, again, just kind of standing, usually 1 foot forward. The cool thing here, this is almost kind of more of a bodybuilding thing. You can kind of come out to the side, you can come in, you can get more of that supination where you're spinning your hands, or just kind of coming in close with some hammer curls, Again, I'm just warming up, so it doesn't really matter. If you want to alternate, you certainly could too. But you know, with the warming up, again, I'm not real specific about it. The more angles you can hit it from, sometimes the better, because I'm just trying to thoroughly kind of warm up my muscles in a few different planes. So I'm just going to come in here, no rhyme or reason, and just warm that up. And I think this band works out really well for that. So I'm definitely still all about bands, particularly when it comes to warming up. Okay, now, sometimes when I'm in the gym too, if I didn't have the band with me and maybe the TRX was being used, cables are a nice way to warm yourself up as well. So cables come in different varieties. You know, some gyms have the free motion with the independent arms, or like Cybec Bravo, or some of those different pieces of equipment. This one's a little more straightforward. I have these cool CAS handles, which I'll talk about in another video. You know, I'll just come in here and grab these. These aren't equal right now, so you want to always shore those up. Make sure you're on the same page. Obviously, make sure if you're using a weight stack or plate loaded, it's about the same. A nice way to warm up my back of my shoulders is I'll just come in here a lot of times, and I'll just do kind of a high-low, sort of like a mid-row. Okay, just focusing on kind of squeezing my shoulder blades. Not really getting too much of a pause on either side. Nice way to warm up the back and the arms, okay? And then sometimes I might spin around. In this case, I'd probably lower this down a little bit. Say if I'm coming in for upper body. I have the bench here right now, which I obviously would move, but just for the sake of time, I'll kind of keep it here. And I might just come in here and just kind of do some chest presses, just to kind of warm myself up. And again, I'm not real heavy. You know, I could pretty easily do 20 to 30 here. Definitely probably even more than that. So sometimes I might pyramid up a little bit if I'm going to work out particularly heavy, meaning that I might do a couple of you know, progressions. So I might start out real light, so I could do well over 30 with that weight. And then if I'm going to load up chest pretty heavy that day, you know, I might even say, okay, let's put a little bit more weight on, kind of as a, you know, almost an extended warm up in a way. The other thing I was going to mention too, though, is this is all just kind of exclusively warming up. Now, if I wanted to come in right after this and do this as an exercise, I would probably do maybe sometimes a couple of pit stops on the way. And so depending on how heavy I'm going, you know, I might decide, I'm probably not going to go extremely close to my work set weight because I want to save some energy for that. But I might just do at least a couple sets at a low weight, or maybe I'll do, you know, 1 or 2 sets at a low weight if this is my first exercise. If I'm already warmed up because I did some other exercises, I'm not going to make all those pit stops along the way. But what I would probably do is I might start out with, you know, this weight here, and then maybe I would go, so let's just say hypothetically if this was about half of the weight I was going to use for my work set, I might just go up to like 75-ish maybe, you know, and as soon as I get that indication, so if I'm doing the exercise, as soon as I get that indication that I'm getting a little muscle fatigue, I'll typically stop at that point. So I just want that muscle working, blood flowing, kind of pumping feeling, starting to get a little fatigued, I would go ahead and stop. And that's one reason I don't always count the reps during my warm-up. It's really kind of based on feel sometimes, because the idea again is I'm not trying to take away a lot from my work sets, you know, when I'm actually doing the exercise by warming up. And that's one of the pitfalls with really long and extended warm-ups. You know, a lot of times people, especially in the rehab community, talk about doing all these things on the mat. And then you sort of get to the workout and you've already spent, you know, 20 minutes in the gym, 30 minutes in the gym. And I don't think you should necessarily have to warm up that long, particularly when you're pressed for time. So I'll come in here, you know, a couple sets ascending. You know, if I was going to do, say, bench presses after this, you know, 2-3 sets max, probably not even that, because usually I'll do 2 sets. And then when I'm going to bench press, especially that first exercise, well, I'm going to sort of pyramid that up as well. So there's kind of a lot of warming up that actually happens. So it really just depends again on you as well. Like I've had some different issues with bicep tendonitis, and I've had some issues sometimes with my shoulder. So I'm a little more careful there, and sometimes I'll warm that up a little bit more. And sort of like I was talking about. Now, if you are somebody who has a bad back or a bad knee, again, same thing. You may want to spend a little extra time warming up those specific muscle groups. And that may warrant some time on the mat, maybe for, you know, 5 or 10 minutes. And now, if you're injury-free, though, you don't necessarily have to do, you know, you could say, people call that prehab, you know, prevent injuries from coming. I don't know that you need to do all that, but I do think you need to do some degree of warming up. I don't think you should just come in cold to a gym and just start throwing weights around. And so this is kind of a way to make sure that hopefully you're going to keep yourself in the game for longer. But again, if you have had an injury in the past, then you might want to spend some more time there. And you might want to go back. I have a couple of videos up on low back stuff, so you can definitely check those out to get some ideas, you know, the hip swiveling and the bird dogs and some of those different exercises I think are a nice way to also warm your body up when you've had some low back stuff going on. So definitely check that out. Well, this is my 2 cents with the cables here for now. Okay, so sort of the last thing I'll say on warming up is actually the cheapest way to warm yourself up, and that's with a jump rope. I really like jump ropes a lot. I meant to add some content about this during the pandemic before you could get into a gym. This is probably one of the best pieces of cardio equipment you can own, in my opinion, and I think it's just a great way because it's so economical to warm your body up. It does a nice job warming up your shoulders. You definitely get some calves as well. And so sometimes I'll just come in here, 5-10 minutes with a jump rope. And I'm not typically going to be doing doubles and really fancy stuff. Usually if I'm just warming up, I'm pretty much just going to alternate between doing kind of like a runner. I'll do some single leg, I'll do some double leg hops. I'll just come in here, do some single leg, maybe alternating, I'll do some double leg hops. And I'm not necessarily trying to go super fast or get too fancy. Just kind of warm myself up here. So I'll just, again, no particular way, you can kind of do some different footwork here, but again, I'm not terribly concerned about the footwork when I'm just warming up. Now, if I'm doing this kind of, more of a cardio workout, I might do some doubles and triples and that sort of thing. This is a pretty cool rope by Rogue, by the way. I'll put the link to this at the bottom. I got quite a few ropes on Amazon, and they all kinked and kind of eventually broke, and so I decided to penny up and get a better rope on Rogue. I don't necessarily think you need a fancy rope, but because I had so many problems with it, I got this, and it hasn't let me down. The things that I get in the gym, I tend to beat up on a lot, so I don't mind sometimes spending a little more for. Maybe you guys know of a good rope on Amazon. If you do, let me know. But for now, this Rogue speed rope has been a really good one for me. And so that's the jump rope, which if you're going to do the jump rope, you don't necessarily need to do the bike or the treadmill or whatever else you're doing. Typically, I'll just pick one piece of cardio-esque equipment to do for the warm-up. So if I'm doing the rope, I'm not doing the bike, and vice versa. But the rope is a great way to do this, especially if you don't have a bike, if you have a garage gym, or if you just want to do something different. So that's the warm-up with the rope in a nutshell. Okay, so I just want to give you my 2 cents on warming up, and that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I think you guys should do it. It's definitely going to probably keep you less injury prone in the long run. Research kind of goes back and forth on warming up, but I think there's a lot of confounds there. From my personal experience and working with patients, I do think warming up is helpful. When it comes to stretching though, I don't always know that that's as helpful in someone who's young and healthy and doesn't have a lot of injuries. Sometimes people think they need to stretch. The problem with stretching though is that it doesn't really increase our tissue temperature all that much. And so when we say warming up, we're talking about bringing up the tissue temperature, like say in my arms, and it becomes more elastic, it becomes more pliable. And what that allows for is the tissue to kind of move more freely and easily, and because it brings more blood flow into that area. And so I do think that actually will help quite a bit. Now, if you're just going to do some static stretching, stretch out the hamstrings, and then you think you're ready for some leg exercises or some running, I don't necessarily know that that's always the way to go. If you need to do static stretching, that's kind of another conversation, and there is a time and a place for it, particularly for some people who are coming off of injuries and maybe they do have some range of motion restrictions. If you just strained your tricep and you'd lack that range of motion, sometimes you might want to stretch that out and then try to use that range with the exercise. Or sometimes I might even do a little bit of an exercise, stretch it out, and then exercise it again. So that's kind of a unique case. Most of the time though, I don't find that static stretching is as important as some people believe it to be. Sometimes it ends up getting dropped because I tell people do it at the end of the workout, and by the end of the workout they're already tired, they want to go home, they want to eat, whatever, and that's totally understandable. You're not going to probably be shortchanging yourself that much if you don't stretch, but I think you will if you don't warm up. Young bodies can probably get away with it for a while, but eventually it might start catching up to you. Particularly when you're getting to those more advanced levels of training, you're starting to use heavier weights, heavier loads. If you're just somebody who wants to just kind of be a general fitness type person, and you're not necessarily looking to really get strong and use a lot of weight, you might be able to skate around, doing a warm up like what I'm talking about in this video. But you may not, because there are plenty of people that are not super fit that have a lot of training related injuries as well. So again, depends on what you want to get back to. Is static stretching warranted? Sometimes. Is warming up a good idea? I'd say most of the time. And as always though, that's my 2 cents. I'll put the links to the stuff that I use in the video below, mostly just the Gold TheraBand and the Rogue speed rope, so you can find that stuff below. And then any other questions or comments for me, let me know. If anybody knows where I can find a good rope on Amazon, it's a little cheaper, let me know. I just didn't find a good one. So that's warming up. A lot more content coming your way. I'm going to get in some exercises now. A lot of gym stuff coming, so hopefully that'll be the next batch of content. And if you guys have any special requests, don't hesitate, let me know that as well. And as always, I hope you guys have some fun.